Before sunrise, the Hadzabe are already awake. A bowstring is pulled tight. An arrow turns over the coals. By the time the first light reaches the ground, everything they need for the day fits into 2 hands. Yesterday's meal is already gone. Whatever they find before sunset is what everyone around the fire will eat tonight. The Hadzabe are one of the last hunter-gatherer societies still living this way in northern Tanzania. With little more than handmade bows and generations of knowledge, they survive in a landscape where every day depends on what nature is willing to give. Over the next few hours, you'll see how they track wild animals across dry ground, climb towering trees for honey, uncover food hidden beneath the earth, make fire without matches, and read signs in the landscape that most people would walk straight past. Some days end with enough food to feed the entire camp. Others end with everyone eating baobab and going to sleep. These are the primitive survival secrets of the Hadzabe tribe. If you want to see how a day like this ends, subscribe and come with them. The most important thing a Hadzabe hunter carries is not the bow, it is the arrow. A bow can be replaced, an arrow has to be trusted. Before anyone walks into the bush, every shaft is checked by hand. A small bend that nobody else would notice can send the point away from where it needs to go. The wood is heated over the fire until it softens, then straightened little by little. Some pieces return to shape. Others never do and are left behind. The iron heads are the only part of the weapon that does not come from this land. They arrive through trade with neighboring people who keep cattle and work metal. Everything around them is made here. The bow comes from a single piece of wood. The string is made from animal sinew. The quiver is hide-shaped and stitched to carry the arrows into the bush. But the iron alone is not what makes the arrow dangerous. A small amount of sap from a wild plant is warmed over the fire and pressed onto the metal tip. When it cools, it holds tight. That simple coating is what allows a light wooden arrow to do what the bow itself seems too small to do. Bring down an animal many times heavier than the person carrying it. By the time most children here can walk with the adults, they already carry a bow of their own. It is small, the arrows are only for birds, and they miss far more often than they hit. Nobody hands a child a finished one. He makes it, he breaks it, and he makes another. Out here, nobody is born a hunter. Nothing about these weapons is powerful by modern standards. There are no sights, no spare arrows waiting in a vehicle, no second chance if the first shot goes wrong. The men carry only what they can take with them: a bow, a quiver, a small axe, and the knowledge of where to use them. When the hunters finally leave camp, there is no ceremony. One man steps forward, and the others follow. Within minutes, the fire is behind them. Ahead is the same ground their ancestors walked for thousands of years. And somewhere out there, the first sign of an animal is already waiting. Out here, the ground speaks before the animals do. The hunters stop long before they see anything alive. One man kneels while the others wait behind him. There is no hurry. A trail read badly is worse than one never followed at all. The sand holds more than footprints. A stone has been turned onto its clean side. A blade of dry grass bends against the others. Fresh earth lies across leaves that should still be covered. None of it matters on its own. Together, it tells them something moved through here only a few hours ago. They study the ground first. Age is the first thing they read. Wind softens the edge of a print surprisingly quickly out here. By midday yesterday and this morning can look almost the same. These edges are still sharp. The prints are deep and round. Along the edge of each one, there is no mark where a claw should be. Cats walk with their claws pulled in. Dogs do not. Something heavy passed this way during the night, moving slowly enough that it had nothing to fear. The men leave the trail exactly where it is. Finding an animal is not always the same thing as finding food. They keep working the ground instead. A little farther on, the story changes. The grass has been pressed flat in a broad line. A branch is broken at chest height, the pale wood still fresh where it snapped. Hoof marks cross the soft sand in every direction before coming together again toward the low hills. A herd moved through here after sunrise. This time, the hunters do not hesitate. Without a word, they turn and follow. The first trail worth following appears not long after sunrise. Fresh hoof prints cut across a patch of soft ground. Nearby, the soil has been torn open where something was feeding beneath the surface. The hunters slow down. A warthog passed through here recently. The tracks lead toward a stretch of open country where the grass grows low and scattered. The men spread out and begin working their way forward against the wind. The animal appears before anyone reaches it, head down, feeding. Nobody moves while it is looking up. The first arrow flies. It misses. The warthog bolts across the open ground and disappears into thicker cover. Nobody runs after it. The hunters keep walking. A second chance comes later. This time, the arrow finds its mark. The warthog runs again. And again, the hunters do not chase. The shot only tells them where the next part of the hunt begins. The trail continues through dust-thorn scrub and patches of hard ground where almost nothing remains visible. When the prints disappear, the men look for disturbed soil. When the soil tells them nothing, they look for bent grass or broken branches. The animal is always leaving signs behind. The challenge is noticing them before they disappear. Hour after hour, the trail grows easier to read. The tracks lose their rhythm. The ground shows more hesitation. The path becomes less direct. The warthog is slowing down. By the middle of the afternoon, the trail ends beneath a thorn bush. The hunt itself lasted only a few moments. Finding the animal took the rest of the day. Sometimes the Hadzabe are not the first to find the honey. A small bird gets there first. It calls from the trees ahead, and it does not stop. The call is not the sound a bird makes to other birds. It is aimed at whoever is walking below it. Few wild animals willingly lead people anywhere. This one does. The men call back. The bird drops to the next tree and starts again, always ahead of them, never far enough ahead to be lost. The bird knows where the hive is and has no way of opening one. The Hadzabe can open anything they can reach, and they cannot search the whole bush. The whistle the men answer with is not something anybody invented recently. Birds and people have been running this arrangement here since long before anyone in the world planted a field. In places where people stopped answering, the birds stopped calling. The knowledge goes both ways, and both sides can lose it. The men follow until the calling finally stops beneath an ancient hollow tree. The hive is hidden deep inside the trunk. From the ground, the only sign of it is bees moving in and out of a crack in the wood. One of the men gathers dry grass and decaying leaves at the base of the tree. The bundle is made to smolder rather than burn. The thick smoke drives most of the bees out of the hollow. Then the climb pieces of golden comb are lifted out, one by one, thick honey dripping slowly onto waiting hands. They take only enough for the group. The rest is left quietly where it is, so the bees can go on living and rebuilding, and the same tree may feed them again another season. Something else is left behind as well. When the hunters leave, the bird returns for the wax. Honey was never what it came for. Wax is, and it is, one of the very few animals anywhere that can live on it. Almost nothing else can. Beeswax passes straight through most animals without feeding them at all, which is exactly why nobody else competes for what gets left at the foot of the tree. The honey is gone. The wax is gone. By tomorrow, both the bird and the Hadzabe will be looking for another hive. Most of what the Hadzabe kill never reaches the camp at all. Part of every animal is eaten where it fell within minutes, before anything is carried anywhere. What goes first is the part most people would leave last. The insides come out and go straight onto the coals, and some of them do not go onto the coals at all. There is a reason for the order. Organs spoil faster than muscle in this heat, and they hold more fat and more of everything the body needs than the meat around them. Nothing is washed. Water out here is hours away in either direction, and no one is going to carry it this far to pour it over their hands. The meat comes off the fire with ash on it. The blackened outside is scraped back, and whatever is still stuck to the rest goes down with everything else. Bones get cracked open against a rock for the marrow inside them. The honeycomb is eaten whole, wax comb, and the young bees still sitting in it, all of it together, straight out of the hand.
Having a little snack right there.
Flies land on everything. Nobody waves them off.
Wow, unbelievable, what a day. Having a little snack.
There are no plates, no water, no washing, and no waiting for anybody who has not arrived yet.
What a day.
To most people, watching all of this would look unclean. Nobody here has ever thought about it that way. Researchers who have studied the Hadzabe found some of the most varied gut bacteria ever recorded in people, and a lifetime of eating exactly like this is where it comes from. The body that grew up on this ground handles this ground. By the time everyone stands up, there is very little left behind. Bones, ash, and a few pieces of hide that even the flies have finished with. Not every trail becomes a meal. Most of them do not. Fresh tracks are easy to find after sunrise. Keeping up with them is something else. Sometimes the wind changes. Sometimes the herd reaches open ground before the hunters do. Sometimes an animal catches a movement that should never have happened, and sometimes it simply disappears. Nobody gets angry. Nobody calls the hunt a failure. The men stop where the tracks end, look around for a moment, and then quietly begin following something else. Out here, wasting the day on one animal is a bigger mistake than losing it. The Hadzabe do not hunt for a single prize. They hunt for whatever the land is willing to give them that day. A warthog becomes a porcupine. A porcupine becomes a guinea fowl. A handful of birds becomes honey. If none of those appear, there are still tubers waiting beneath the ground, back toward camp. The meal changes, the plan changes, the hunt never really stops. That is how people survive in a place where success is never guaranteed. Not by refusing to fail, by never letting one failure become the end of the day. A zebra is a rare day. Most days look like this one. A few quills are lying in the dirt in front of a hole in the ground. Porcupine, still using it and probably still down there right now. The hole was dug by something else years ago and taken over since. It runs further back than anybody can reach. An arrow goes in first to pin the animal against the back of the burrow so it cannot work its way deeper while they dig. Then, the digging starts. Hands, sticks loose earth, thrown back between the legs, everyone working at the same hole. The quills are the problem. They come out of the animal on contact. They go into skin easily, and they do not pull back out the way they went in. So nobody reaches in. A long stick goes down, instead working blind feeling for the shape of it and holding it still while the earth comes away from the sides. It comes out heavy dark and covered in the only weapon it has. Later the same afternoon, a bird calls from the tall trees. One man moves toward the base of the trunk. Everybody else stops where they are and stays stopped. The wait is long. Birds do not settle while anything is still moving underneath them. When it finally drops to a low branch, one arrow goes up and the bird comes down within seconds. The group moves on before the rest of them scatter. Neither of these animals will be talked about tonight. A porcupine and a bird do not make a story. They make dinner, which is a different thing, and they do it far more often than the zebra ever will. The Hadzabe are not the only hunters on these plains. Sometimes the best lesson of the day comes from an animal they never intend to chase. A herd of antelope is feeding in the open when everything changes at once. One animal bolts, then the whole herd explodes across the grass. The chase is over almost before it begins. The men never move. Walking toward a fresh kill would be one of the most dangerous decisions they could make. Whatever brought that antelope down has no reason to give it up. So they watch instead. Where the attack began, how close the predator waited before it moved. Which way the herd escaped, which patches of cover the animals avoided when they ran. And one thing more, an animal that has just eaten is not hunting again for a while. Every hunt leaves information behind, not just tracks in the sand, but patterns that repeat day after day. The antelope slowly return to the same grass they fled only minutes before. They are feeding again, but not carelessly. Every few seconds, heads come up together and turn toward the same patch of thorn. The danger has not gone away. It has only become harder to see. The herd will not go far. The grass here is better than anything within a morning's walk. The Hadzabe remember places like this, not because they expect to find meat. Because knowing where predators hunt is often more valuable than knowing where prey feeds. Every morning, this camp splits in two. One group hunts animals, the other hunts the ground. The hunters go out onto the plains, and nothing about what they bring back is certain. The women go the other way with digging sticks over their shoulders. What they are looking for does not run, hide, or fight back. Wild tubers lie hidden beneath the dry ground, found by the thin vines spreading across the surface. The digging is slow, the ground is hard, and the roots go down further than anyone would guess, and freeing one can take longer than the walk out to find it. What comes up is tough and full of fiber. It gets chewed for the moisture and the starch, and what is left over gets spat out on the ground. The children come along. They watch which vines are worth stopping at and which ones are not, and after a few seasons, they stop needing to be shown. Baobab comes back with them too. The fruit dries hard on the branch, and the powder inside it keeps for months, which matters more here than anything about the taste. But it is always there. A hunt can end with nothing at all. The ground almost never does. Most of what this camp eats does not arrive on the end of an arrow. By midday, the first tubers are already back at camp, enough to keep everyone fed while the hunters are still out on the plains. Finding food is only part of the job. Keeping it can be just as difficult. The baboons know exactly where the camp is. They watch from the rocks above it, waiting for the right moment to come closer. They have tried this before. They come down when the noise drops. For a few seconds, both sides hesitate. Then the whole camp erupts at once. The troop goes back up the way it came. Not far. They settle on the rocks in the open and sit there looking down. Nothing was taken today. The hunters may still come back with meat before sunset. They may not. Either way, the camp never gambles everything on a single hunt. The most dangerous hunt of the day is the one that never happens. Fresh tracks appear beside a dried mud hole pressed deep into the ground beneath a stand of thorn trees. Buffalo. Nobody says a word, but the pace changes. Every step becomes slower. Every sound matters. The trail leads through dry grass and scattered thorn until close to midday, the hunters finally stop. The buffalo is standing in the shade. It has no idea the men are there. No bow is raised, No arrow is drawn. The hunters simply watch. For a long moment, nothing moves. Then the man in front turns around. The others follow him without question. They do not go back the way they came. They swing wide, keeping the wind coming at them the whole time, so that nothing about their smell reaches the shade behind them. An animal that never knows it was found stays exactly where it is. An animal that catches a scent starts moving, and from that point on, nobody controls where it goes. Only after they are well away does the reason become clear. The poison on a Hadzabe arrow is meant for an animal that keeps running. A buffalo often does the opposite. When wounded, it may circle back, disappear into cover, and wait for whatever is following it. Out there, the hunter becomes the one being hunted. There is no version of this hunt that ends well with the weapons these men are carrying. A buffalo would take the arrow and keep its strength for hours. The buffalo remains beneath the trees. The Hadzabe leave exactly as they came, without a single shot. For these hunters, knowing when not to hunt is every bit as important as knowing how. For the Hadzabe, killing a zebra is never the end of the hunt. Large tracks in the soft ground lead the group to a wide clearing and a herd grazing in the open. One animal watches in one direction. A herd watches in every direction at once. The men come in low through the bushes and wait for the herd to drift apart. One arrow flies. The herd explodes across the clearing. Another arrow follows it. One zebra breaks away from the rest, runs a short distance, and goes down in the open. The men reach it within minutes. Then they stop because the hunt has just turned into a completely different problem. A zebra weighs more than everything else these men have taken all season put together. There is no carrying it whole. The obvious answer is to take what they can now and come back for the rest tomorrow. Nobody here has ever done that. The first thing to arrive is not an animal at all. It is a bird, and then another, and then a dozen more, turning in a slow column above one fixed point on the plain. Vultures do not just eat meat, they announce it. That column can be read from miles away by everything with an interest in it. Hyenas come at a trot. Lions come without hurrying. A leopard may have been watching the whole thing from cover since before the first arrow. And if none of them came at all, the sun would finish the job by the middle of tomorrow. On open ground, a kill never really belongs to whoever brought it down. It belongs to whoever is still standing over it an hour later. So the animal is taken apart where it fell. The work is fast, and nobody stops to rest in the middle of it. The meat is divided into loads each man can carry. Every part worth taking gets taken. What stays behind is what nobody could use. One journey instead of 3, and no reason to walk back out here in the morning. By the time the vultures reach the ground, the Hadzabe are already gone. The men come in late, each of them carrying part of the same animal. Nothing is lit when they arrive. Fire here is not something anybody keeps in a pocket. A pointed stick is set into a notch in a softer piece of wood and spun between the palms until the dust in the notch begins to smoke. The ember that comes out of it is smaller than a fingernail. It goes into a handful of dry grass, and the grass is lifted and breathed into until it catches. The whole thing takes a few minutes, and everybody in this camp learned it before they learned to hunt. No pots, no oil, no salt. The meat goes straight onto the coals. The outside blackens, and the black is scraped away afterwards to get at what is underneath. Then it is divided. Nobody asks who fired the first arrow. Nobody asks who walked the furthest, or who found the trail, or who carried the heaviest load back. The old people are fed. The children are fed. The ones who never left camp today are fed. There is a reason for this, and it has nothing to do with kindness. Every hunter here comes home empty more often than he comes home full. A good year still contains long stretches where a man brings back nothing at all. If meat belonged to whoever killed it, everyone in this camp would starve on their own separate schedule. Sharing it spreads the risk across the whole group instead. Today, the zebra was one man's arrow. Tomorrow, it will be somebody else's, or it will be a bag of tubers, or it will be nothing. Out on the plain, a kill never belongs to whoever brought it down. Back here, it does not either. The fire drops. The children fall asleep where they are sitting on the sand close to the adults. Somebody is still talking about the mud hole and the buffalo standing in the shade. Tomorrow, the camp will split in two again and go looking. The savannah goes quiet. Somewhere out in the thorn, the buffalo is still standing where they left it, and the hive in the hollow tree has already begun rebuilding itself. What they carry is not better weapons. It is knowledge that has been passed from one generation to the next. Somewhere in this camp, a child is asleep beside a bow too small to bring anything down. In a few years, it will not be. It has kept them fed here for thousands of years on ground that gives very little to anybody who cannot read it. By sunrise, yesterday's tracks will be gone. The knowledge will remain. These have been the primitive survival secrets of the Hadzabe tribe. There is another people, another kind of ground in the next one. Somewhere in the dry hills of northern Tanzania, there is an antelope in a tree. "15 feet off the ground, folded over a branch, 4 legs hanging in open air. Antelope do not climb. This is the country the Hadzabe tribe live on, in the hills and thorn scrub around Lake Eyasi. Nobody here stops to look at it. They glance up once, and then they walk around that tree instead of under it. If you want to see the parts of the world nobody points a camera at, subscribe and come with them. Because here is the thing about this ground. No fences, no walls, nothing that closes at night. The Hadzabe share these hills with leopards, hyenas, and baboons, and each of those animals has its own way of finding out whether anybody is paying attention. One of them tests at night, at the exact moment the fire drops low. One of them keeps a lookout, sitting above the rest of the troop, watching while the others eat. And the third one is the reason nobody walks under that branch. This valley has no wells and no pipes. There is water here, but it is under the sand, and it comes up one handful at a time. Then, there is the question of how any of this is survivable at all. A Hadzabe bow is shorter than the man carrying it. The arrow is a stick. Watch one of these men bring down an animal 5 times his weight, and you will assume you just watched a very good shot. You did not. The arrow does not kill the animal. Something else on the arrow does that, and it is not the metal tip. There is one more thing worth knowing before the sun comes up. Look at a Hadzabe camp, and almost everything in it came out of the ground within a mile of where it sits. The bow, the shelter, the fire. Then there is one small piece of metal that did not. Nobody in this camp makes metal. It comes from somewhere else, and so does the reason this way of living is getting harder every year. The food is too hot to hold, and nobody is waiting for it to cool. A girl has both hands wrapped around a length of intestine, pulling it against her own teeth to tear a bite off. Her father is doing the same thing beside her. A toddler has a piece of his own. He has already worked out that you blow on it first. Look at what the small children are eating. It is not softer, and it is not separate. It is the same thing the hunters are eating off the same fire at the same moment. There is no children's food here because there is no such thing as a second sitting. A carved gourd holds the softer parts, and it goes from hand to hand without anybody asking for it. Nothing is measured out. Nobody serves anybody. And the people who never left camp today are eating exactly what the people who walked all morning are eating. Watch long enough and you will see what is missing. Nobody is putting anything aside. Not for tomorrow, not for the man who is still out somewhere, not for the lean stretch everybody knows is coming. That is not a rule about generosity, it is the weather. Out here, meat left overnight is usually not worth keeping by morning, and there is no jar and no cool room to argue with that. So it all goes now. It carries on until there is nothing left to pass, and the gourd goes down empty. Most evenings in this camp end more or less like this one. But there is a kind of news that can stop a meal before it starts. It comes in during the middle of the day, brought by people who were not due back until dark. They are not carrying anything. That is the first thing wrong with it. A group of women walks back into camp in the early afternoon hours ahead of schedule, and the digging sticks are still clean. Something sent them home, and it was not a sound. Out here, a lion announces itself and a hyena announces itself. Both of those you can hear coming, and both of those you can walk away from. What they found was quieter than that. Four parallel grooves in the bark of a tree, about chest height on a man. Prints in the soft ground underneath round, with no claw mark at the front of any of them. Cats keep their claws pulled in when they walk. Dogs do not. And the prints are small. Whatever made them is not big. Then somebody looks up. "15 feet above the ground, wedged into the fork of the tree, there is an antelope, folded over the branch, 4 legs hanging in open air. Around here, meet up a tree almost always means one animal. A leopard hauls a kill into the branches so that hyenas cannot get at it. Nobody moves any closer. The men stand under the branch, and nobody says anything for a while. Then somebody looks back down at the ground, and that is where the afternoon really turns. The ground under that tree is carrying more than one set of tracks. It has been crossed and crossed again, and none of it is old. The leopard is not the only thing that has been here. Word gets back to camp, and the answer is not a hunting party, it is a change of route. The women work a different stretch of ground. Anybody sent for firewood goes around. The tree is simply subtracted from the map. And this is the part that is easy to miss. Everything these men just did, the prints, the claw marks, the reading, is exactly what they do when they are hunting. Same skill, opposite purpose. There is a second animal that studies this camp the same way. It will not need a tree, and it will not come in daylight. It will stop just past the edge of the firelight and wait for the flames to drop. The fire is the last thing anyone here puts out because nobody does. It burns down, and a hand reaches over and drops another branch on it, and the ring of light opens back out. There is no fence around this camp, no wall, no door, nothing that shuts. There is a ring of light, and there is how far it reaches. Out past it, the calls start. One from somewhere off to the left answered from the right. More than one of them, and not in the same place. Then the eyes, green when the light catches them low to the ground and set too far apart to belong to one animal. They do not charge. They sit down and stay there. A hyena will hold a spot for a long stretch, doing nothing at all, then close some of the distance, then hold again. None of it is fast. That is what makes it work. So somebody gets to their feet. Voices go up. A branch goes onto the coals, and the light pushes back out, and the shapes give ground. Then the fire drops again. Out in daylight, it goes differently, because there is nothing to feed. A clan works around a group of men, in the open, moving, testing one side, and then another. The men come together, back to back, and the bows come up and stay up. Nobody shoots. The bows are there to make the group look like one thing instead of five. This is what these animals do for a living. A clan can pull down a full-grown animal, and it can also drive something else off a carcass and take over. Hadzabe hunters have been watching them do it for generations. They have also learned to do it. Not all of the meat in this camp was killed by anybody in it. Some of it was taken. birds give it away first. Vultures do not circle over nothing. A column of them turning in one place means there is a carcass underneath, and every animal out here can read that column just as well as the men can. So nobody walks to it, they go at a pace. Understand what is different about this. At the leopard tree, they went around. Here, they are going straight at the thing on purpose, and the reason is arithmetic. A carcass on open ground belongs to whoever is standing on it, and that changes hands all afternoon. Researchers who lived in Hadzabe camps and weighed what came in found that around 1 carcass in 5 had not been hunted by anybody in the camp. It had been found. Some of those were already abandoned. Some of them were not, and those are the ones that take nerve. Because there is no trick to what follows. The men come in as a group upright loud, and they do not slow down. Nothing out here wants a fight. It did not start. Faced with a line of upright shapes that keeps coming, an animal that has already fed will usually give up the carcass rather than take an injury for it. It backs off. It does not go far, and everyone working knows it. So the butchering is fast and rough. Meat comes off in loads a man can carry. Nobody trims carefully, and whatever cannot be carried stays where it is. This works on numbers and nothing else. 5 men do it. 1 man does not, and 1 man does not try. Now take away the vultures. Most days there is no column in the sky, and nothing has died anywhere nearby. Whatever gets eaten tonight has to be killed first. And the tool for that is a stick with a piece of metal on the end, drawn from a bow a grown man can barely pull to his shoulder. Look at it once, and you would not give it a chance. A man is sitting beside a fire, far too small to cook anything on. He is turning something on the end of a stick, holding it close to the heat, and the material is going darker and thicker while he works. It comes from the desert rose. Squat trunk, smooth bark, bright flowers, and it does not grow anywhere near this camp. What he is making goes on the shaft, just behind the metal head, not on the point. The point has to go in clean. And this is the thing that Bao could never do by itself. The desert rose is loaded with compounds that attack the heart. Once they are in the bloodstream, the animal is on a clock, and how long that clock runs comes down to how much animal there is. Which is why nobody runs after anything. A giraffe can stay on its feet for 3 to 6 hours after the arrow goes in. 6 hours of following it. 6 hours in open sun at whatever pace the giraffe sets. Shooting the animal takes 1 second. Getting it takes the rest of the day. And out on that walk, there is a test for whether any of it is working. Where the animal has bled onto the ground, a hunter will take a drop of it on his tongue and spit it straight back out. Bitter means the poison is in the blood and moving. Not bitter means a long afternoon and quite possibly nothing at the end of it. So the obvious question, if the animal dies of a heart poison, what happens to everybody who eats it? The flesh around the wound is cut out and thrown away. The rest goes on the fire, and that is the end of the problem. So most of a hunt is walking. Half a day behind an animal that is still moving in that heat across ground where there is no water in any direction. There is water out here. It is just nowhere anybody would think to look. Ask what a Hadzabe man does for a living, and the honest answer is that he walks. Researchers put GPS units on 41 adults here and measured it. The men cover about 7 miles on an average day. The women cover less ground and at a slower pace, and they are usually carrying a child while they do it. Doing this for exercise. The hunting is wherever the animals happen to be that week, and water is hours away in either direction. And water out here does not mean a river. In the dry season, the rivers stop running on the surface, and what is left is a channel of sand lying between 2 banks. So somebody kneels down in the middle of it and starts digging. The water has not gone anywhere. It dropped, and it is still moving down there through the sand, and a hole dug past the elbow will fill from the bottom. It seeps. You scoop what has gathered, tip it into a gourd, and wait for the next handful, and then you carry it back the way you came. Now here is the part that ought to be impossible. The same group of researchers also measured how much energy Hadzabe bodies burn in a day and compared it against adults in America and Europe. Pound for pound, it came out about the same.
And they're going to show us how they harvest it.
7 miles of thorn country in that heat on foot, and the daily total sits roughly where it sits for somebody who drove to work and sat down. These are smaller, leaner bodies, so the raw numbers are lower. It is the rate that matches. Researchers still argue about what that means. "7 miles, every day, bodies that will not spend any more than hours do sitting still. Now watch what goes with them. A pot, a bow, a knife, a skin. a child on the hip. That is the load, and it goes 7 miles today and 7 miles again tomorrow. And when the walk is long, and there is nothing at the end of it, there is one thing out here that has never once moved. Children go out from this camp on their own. No adult walks with them. Nobody asks where they are going. Nobody sets a time to be back, and nobody comes looking. Some of them are carrying knives. Stop on that for a second, because grown men with bows come back from this same country with nothing at all some days. So where does a 6-year-old go? Not after the hunters. Children go to the tree. The baobab is the biggest thing growing in this country, and the oldest one in it, and the trunk on a full-grown one is wider than the shelter a whole family sleeps in. Its fruit hangs in hard pods on a long stalk, and it does not rot on the branch. It dries there. Crack one open, and there is no juice at all. Just chalky white chunks packed around black seeds, dry as powder and sour enough to make a face. Pounded up with water in a gourd that is a meal. And the tree is standing where it stood last year, loaded whether or not anybody had a good week. So the children eat out there where the food is. Whatever is left over comes back to camp in a hand or a fold of cloth, and nobody makes a fuss of it. Then researchers spent years weighing what Hadzabe children were actually bringing in. Between roughly 5 and 10 years old, they were covering a serious share of the calories they ate each day. They are not helping the adults gather. They are feeding themselves. If you have stayed with this camp this long, you are already past where most people stop. Subscribe and stay because it gets stranger from here. And this is where these hills part company with almost everywhere else people live. There is no store here, no granary, no barn, no grain pit behind the huts, and there never has been. The food is standing out in the open, it belongs to nobody, and nobody has to guard it. Because everything else out here eats the same things off the same trees. And one of them is clever, it is fast, and it has been sitting up on the rocks watching this camp since sunrise. Some mornings the group leaves camp fast. This is not one of them. Word came back yesterday about a troop on the rocks, and a troop on the rocks is a hard day, so nothing about this morning is quick. Bows come out and get looked over properly. A man runs a hand down a stave, checks the string, pulls it part way, and lets it back. Arrows come out of the quiver one at a time, and go back in one at a time. Older men sit and talk it through, which way the wind is running, which side of the hill the sun will be on, what that ground was doing the last time anybody worked it. Water gets filled. Someone puts a handful of roots and dried fruit together for the walk. And the children have stopped what they were doing to stand and watch all of it. Nobody is teaching a lesson. The lesson is just happening in front of them, the way it happens every time. Then they go, and the walking is slow. Out in the open woodland, almost every face is tilted up because the information here is in the canopy, and the ground can wait. A branch moving in a way branches do not move on their own. Fruit on the ground chewed and dropped. A call from off to one side. The hardest reading is the one that separates wind from animal. Both move a canopy, and from 100 yards away, both make the same green noise. And then there is the signal that is not a sound at all. Sometimes the woodland just stops. The calling quits. The movement overhead drops away, and everything goes still with nothing visible to explain it. Something has arrived that everything up in those branches can see, and nobody standing underneath them can. Nobody talks about it. From here on, it is hands and glances only. Because there is one animal in these hills that watches back. There is a baboon sitting on top of a rock, and it is not eating. Below it, the troop is working through the scrub, turning stones over, pulling at pods, squabbling. The one on the rock is doing none of that. It is turning its head. Baboons post lookouts, high ground facing out, while the rest of the troop feeds, and the second that lookout calls everything on, that hillside is gone up the rock face. And that is a problem, because a troop like this is worth more to the camp than almost anything else that walks. A big male is the size of a large dog and built like one, and it is feeding on the same pods off the same trees that the children were working yesterday. So this is not a chase. Nothing on two legs is going to outrun a baboon on rock. It is a job against the lookout. The men go wide, around the base of the hill, instead of up at it, keeping boulders and thorn between themselves and the high ground, taking the long way by a distance that makes no sense until you remember what is sitting up there. And they go slowly, slowly enough that from 100 yards up, it does not look like anything moving at all. Then they wait, because a feeding troop does not stay in a tight group. It spreads. Animals drift after whatever they are pulling at, and sooner or later, one of them is a long way from the rest. That is the whole plan, not the troop, one animal and the ground between it and the others. The shot goes through a gap in the scrub. And the hillside detonates. Alarm calls from everywhere. At once, dozens of animals pouring up the rocks, barking down at the men from a place nobody is going to follow them to. The calling goes on for a long time. Nobody down here is paying attention to it. The work starts immediately, and it is quick because there is a lot of daylight left, and this is the first meet in days. By dark, the hillside is a long way behind them. The fire is going, everybody has eaten, and nobody is going anywhere. Somebody starts talking. Children come and sit down, and the ones at the back move in closer to hear. Nothing about this part of the day has anything to do with staying alive. But this is where a child first hears about the animal that sits on the rock and does not eat, and the tree with the antelope in it, and what the calling in the dark means when it comes from two directions at once. Then it goes quiet, and the fire comes down, and somebody stays awake to feed it. Now look at what happened to the skin. It did not go on the fire. It got cleaned and pegged out and kept. Nothing else in this camp gets kept. That does, and there is a reason for it. That skin is going to be carried a very long way. The first thing you see is cattle. hundreds of them penned, and every one of them belongs to somebody. That alone is a different world, and the walk to get here took most of a day. This is a Datoga camp, mud walls that will still be standing next year. Grain kept in one place. Women with heavy brass coils up their arms and beaten metal at their ears, wearing more worked metal on one wrist than exists in an entire Hadzabe camp. The honey comes out, the dried meat, the skin off the rocks. And nobody on either side of this can speak a word the other one understands. Hadzan has never been linked to any language family anywhere on Earth. So the trading happens, the only way it can, between people with no words in common. Things held up, pointing, a great deal of hands. Then somebody starts working a pair of bellows made out of goat skin, and the coals in a shallow pit come up hot. The iron going into that fire is scrap, old truck springs, whatever the road has left behind. It goes red, comes out, gets beaten flat, on a stone folded, heated again, and slowly it stops being part of a vehicle and starts being an arrowhead. Now stop and think about what you have watched for the last hour. A people who make their own bows out of a single piece of wood, who cook their own poison over their own fire, who rid this country better than anybody alive, feed their own children, at 6 years old, take meat off animals that could kill them, and walk 7 miles a day carrying everything they own. And they cannot make this. Not one arrowhead in these hills was made by a Hadzabe hand. Every single point in every quiver came out of a fire, like this one belonging to people who keep animals farm, a little stay in one place and own things. The Hadzabe have never done any of that. For a very long time, it did not matter. Nobody wanted these hills. That has changed. Cattle need grass, and the grass they need is growing here. And where cattle settle, the game moves off. Nobody raided anybody. There has never been a war over this country. The camp will just move again the way it always has, and find there is a little less ground to move into than there was last year. And the trade will carry on because it always has. Honey and skins going one way, arrowheads coming back. They walk home with a few metal points in a pouch. Next dry season, they will make the same walk and bring more honey. By the time the fire is down to coals, the gourd is empty, and there is nothing left in this camp that anybody would come back for. Tomorrow morning, it starts from nothing again. Not as a hardship. That is the arrangement. And that is the part that is easy to miss about the Hadzabe, because it is the reason they are still here at all. Nothing was ever stored, so there was never anything worth taking. No fields to burn, no herds to raid, no store behind the huts that anybody wanted. For most of their history, the safest thing to be in these hills was people with nothing. Now look at what is closing in. Nobody is taking anything from them. There is no raid, no war, nobody to blame. There are cattle standing where the game used to be, and a little less ground every year, and a camp that will move the way it has always moved and find the country smaller when it gets there. The one thing in that camp that will outlast all of it came out of somebody else's fire. Somewhere out in the thorn tonight, there is a tree with an antelope in it, and nobody walking underneath that branch. And in a quiver, in a camp that owns nothing else, a piece of iron from a truck that broke down on a road these people have never driven. On the African savannah, there is a rule that everybody here learns early. If you see a hyena first, you probably still have a chance. But if a leopard has already seen you, there is a good chance you will never find out what happened next. This is a place where people are not at the top of the food chain, and there are still communities who walk out into it every morning with no guns, no armor, no vehicles, and nothing modern of any kind. They are the Hadzabe in the dry country around Lake Eyasi in northern Tanzania. Fewer than 1,500 of them are left. Today, you are going to see how the Hadzabe tribe hunts leopards and lives by ancient rules in one of the harshest landscapes anywhere on this continent. This is what living in Africa still looks like for these people, almost exactly as it looked for their grandparents. What they carry out there is a wooden bow, a few arrows made by hand, and knowledge that nobody ever wrote down. This morning, they are following something that does not want to be followed. Somewhere ahead of them, there is an antelope lying high in the branches of a tree, and nothing that walks on four legs could have put it up there. Stay with this one to the end, because it gets harder to believe as the day goes on. And if you enjoy documentaries like this, a quick like really does help the channel. Because out here, finding the animal was never the difficult part. The difficult part is being the one who sees it first. They leave as soon as there is enough light to read the ground. Nobody talks. Every step goes down softly, because this country carries sound much further than it looks like it should. For a while, it is an ordinary morning. Ground birds break out of the grass ahead of them, and the blunt arrows come out, the plain ones with no poison anywhere near them, because there is no sense putting poison into something small enough to eat whole. One goes into the bag. Then the man in front crouches over a patch of sand. Round pads, claws barely showing, an even space between one print and the next running away toward the tree line. Only one animal in this country leaves that, and it came through recently. The group changes its plan where it stands. Trackers here treat a leopard crossing ground like this as a sign that something worth its attention is close by, and that is enough to turn the whole morning around. So they follow. What comes next is slow and quiet over broken ground, through a dry watercourse, into thicker bush where the sign disappears and has to be found again on the far side. Details most people would walk straight past. Almost 2 hours go by like that. Then nobody is looking at the ground anymore. There is an antelope up in the branches of a large tree, and it did not get there by itself. That is what a leopard does with a kill. Anything left lying on the ground out here belongs to whatever arrives next, so the cat takes it somewhere nothing else can follow it. Which means whatever put it up there has not gone far. Have you ever walked into a place and known without being able to say how that something had already noticed you? The forest starts answering that question for them. birdsong thins out. Monkeys climb higher and stay up there. Then small birds come out of the undergrowth all at once, and the man in front raises his hand. Everybody stops. Nobody speaks, and everybody listens. And in country like this, the silence is worse than a sound would be. They move apart slowly, keeping space between one another so they can watch without making noise, because one dry branch underfoot would end it. Then behind a stand of fallen trees, it is there. Golden and spotted and completely still, its eyes going across the bush as though this ground already belonged to it. A moment later, it goes up a leaning trunk and climbs higher, and from up there, very little can come in without being seen. What these men are dealing with is stronger than any of them, faster than all of them, and better at disappearing than anything else in this forest. So they wait. It takes a long time, and it ends when the animal turns side on and a gap opens between the branches. One bow comes up without a sound. The arrow goes through the gap. The leopard comes off its position, hard loses its footing, and goes down into the dry leaves, and the canopy empties overhead in panic. Nobody moves in. They hold where they are and watch every last movement, because a wounded leopard is dangerous right up until the moment it is not. Only when they are certain does anybody go forward, and they go slowly from the side. There are no cheers when it is over. What is in the group instead is closer to respect for an animal that ruled this piece of forest until an hour ago. They are barely an hour out when somebody stops beside a hole at the base of a tree. Quills lie scattered in the dirt in front of it, long banded dark and light, loose on the ground where they came away from whatever went inside. A porcupine does not run. It turns its back and reverses into a threat, and hands are the usual casualty. So it gets done at a distance with arrows and a long stick, and it takes a good part of the morning. One animal and nowhere near enough for a camp. They keep going. The route bends toward a small stream where the ground turns soft because animals come down to drink there through the middle of the day. bird tracks, hoof prints laid over one another, the thin winding lines that snakes leave behind them in wet sand. Then something a great deal wider than any of that. It runs unbroken across the flat, and what stops the group is not the width of it. It is what is missing along the edges. No prints keeping pace on either side. No claw marks anywhere. Nothing walked here. Pythons leave winding marks in sand and flattened patches through low grass, and people here have been reading that signature for generations. The African rock python is the largest snake on this continent, and it takes what it wants by wrapping and holding. The trail leads into low shrub country, and the line breaks apart. It comes and goes for a long time. Sand holds it, hard ground loses it completely, and there are stretches where the only thing left to read is grass pressed flat in a line that has not stood back up. Sometimes a single trace is enough to start something that runs for hours. Then the lead man signals everybody to stop in front of a dense thicket. Something under the thorn branches does not match the rest of it. A bow comes up, and an arrow goes into the thicket. Further on, fresh drag marks cross open sand, and they lead to a dead tree. What is on that trunk takes a while to separate from the trunk itself. Dark blotching over pale scale, bark that has been splitting and graying for years, and nothing on it moving at all. So the group waits and watches, and nothing comes out. After several minutes of that, the arrows start going in low around the base of the tree before anything can come off it. What follows takes several men and is not quick. By the time they are moving again, the sun is nearly overhead, and the load has changed how fast anybody walks. Near midday, on an open stretch of dry ground, the man in front stops the group again. There is another one out ahead, and it is not hidden. It is crossing bare dirt in full daylight, unhurried moving toward whatever cover it has chosen next. The group spreads out to block the ways out. Once a snake is into heavy cover tracking, it becomes extremely difficult. It never reaches the cover, and that is what decides it. The walk back is slow after that. The load moves from one shoulder to the next along the way, and nobody is in any hurry about it. The camp comes back to life beside the embers of last night's fire. Boughs get checked, Arrows are straightened and sharpened one at a time. Small axes go onto belts, and all of it happens quietly in the cool part of the morning. What they are going out for today is rabbits. Small meat, but meat that can be found, and out here that counts for more than size does. It still costs sharp eyesight, endless patience, and reflexes faster than most people have. There is a second reason to be careful this morning, and it was already on the ground before anybody left camp. They cross grass, still holding dew. The lead man finds what he wants near a thorn thicket, small prints in soft earth, grass cropped short in patches, a narrow run leading in under the branches. The thorn gets worked carefully, and everybody is ready if something breaks cover. It comes out low and fast, and it does not run straight, because nothing that runs straight out here has descendants. It cuts hard twice, and then for a moment, there is nothing in the way. First thing in the bag, and the morning is not half over. They keep working the thicket line for more runs, and 100 yards on the ground gives them something else. A second set of prints lies over the rabbit trails, deeper, longer. The oldest man crouches over them and signals everyone to stop. Not hyena, not a village dog either. A black-backed jackal has come through here, and not long ago. So the formation tightens. They move on, with people watching both sides of the trail, and the boughs do not go back over anybody's shoulder. Before long, there is a faint rustling in the bushes ahead. The jackal comes out between the low trees and stops. Grey along the back and lean with its eyes on the men rather than on the ground. Fresh blood is already on the hunter's gear, and jackals rarely ignore an easy opportunity. Nobody rushes forward. What this asks for is judgment rather than strength. The group closes carefully from more than one side, and nobody makes a sudden move. The animal gives ground slowly without ever turning around, and there is a low sound coming out of it the whole time. Then it breaks sideways and tries to get out through the edge of the encirclement. An arrow goes as it turns, and the animal is into thick brush before anybody can follow it. They do not go in after it. A cornered animal in dense cover is a different proposition from the same animal in the open. So they read the ground instead and follow at walking pace until the trail drifts away into thicker country. Then they gather what they have and start back. It is not much. Nothing here compares to an antelope or to what came off that dead tree yesterday. Nobody is going to remember how many rabbits came back to camp tonight. What they keep returning to is the animal in the low trees, how close it came, and the fact that leaving was its own decision. Out here, even a small day can finish with something else doing the watching. A bow gets pulled to full draw in the middle of the camp and held there while a man looks down the length of the arrow. He is not aiming at anything. He is checking the shaft for a bend that would send it somewhere he did not point it, and he finds one, and it goes back on the embers to be worked straight again. That bow comes back harder than it looks, more than 100 pounds of pull on an average one, which is heavier than most modern hunting bows. Around him, the camp is already going. Smoke through the grass roofs, the fire built back up, children moving between the huts, while the arrows get bundled into the quivers in a mix of blunt heads and sharpened ones, and a few carrying poison. Nobody knows yet what the day is going to put in front of them. Then a soft tick of the tongue goes up, and the men are gone. Behind them, the smoke keeps drifting over the low roofs until the trees close across it. They walk into thorn country in a single line, leather hanging off their shoulders, and feather ornaments moving as they go, and every piece of it has to come home through the same branches it went out through. On soft ground, the line stops. Eyes down, hands to the earth. Something crossed here, in the night, and the group reads it without a word being said. Then a click passes down the line. Nobody turns around. Nobody asks what it meant. Everybody already knows, and the whole group changes direction at once. Their language is built on clicks, and almost nothing else spoken anywhere near here sounds remotely like it. Out ahead, there is a small antelope feeding at the edge of the scrub. Getting to it takes most of an hour. The wind is wrong to start with, so they give up the direct line and work around, and twice the animal lifts its head and everything stops until it goes back down. Another click, and the line begins to bend around the far side. Nobody has spoken since they saw it. When the distance finally closes, the boughs come up, and it ends in a small clearing, and there is no more noise afterward than there was before. They are working back toward camp when the man in front stops the whole group again. There are marks running down the bark of a tree ahead. Nobody goes to the trunk. Everybody looks up into the branches instead, then along the ground underneath, then out at the trail running past it into thicker cover. Nobody says the word leopard. Nobody has to. What they are doing now is the opposite of tracking. They are working out which tree this animal watches from, which way it comes back through when the light starts going, and how much of this ground stops being theirs in about 2 hours. Then the lead man turns the group. They go back the long way, well clear of that trail, and nobody discusses it. That decision is why most encounters out here never happen at all. Because a leopard hunted on purpose is a very different day, and everyone walking this line already knows what that day costs. They pick up the troop before the troop picks them up, which does not happen often. Baboons are feeding along the forest floor and up in the branches above it. Dozens of animals spread across a wide piece of ground, and at any moment, some of them are watching while the rest eat. So the men come in behind the big trunks and the low bushes and give up any idea of speed. It takes a long time to cover very little ground. When it happens once. One bow comes up, one arrow goes, and the whole troop detonates into the canopy above them. The noise carries for a mile and does not stop quickly. Nobody stays underneath it. The game gets tied, and they leave the forest out toward the open grassland because there is better country ahead, and the day has barely started. The grass opens up, and there is a herd of antelope out on it, grazing unbothered. The men stop well short. And then a predator comes out of the grass at a flat sprint, and the whole plain changes at once. It is over in seconds. One animal goes down out there a long way from the men watching it, and the rest of the herd scatters in every direction until the grassland is empty. Nobody moves toward any of it. There is nothing in that kill for them, and there is a good chance that trying would cost more than it returned. So they sit down and wait. What they are waiting for is the thing that happens next, and it is the whole reason anybody can hunt on ground like this. The antelope come back. Not all at once, in ones and twos, back onto the same grass where it happened, heads lifting constantly, feeding in short bursts and checking between each one. An animal that has to eat cannot stay frightened all afternoon. The men work into position while that is going on. Using the tall grass spreading out along the line, the herd is drifting. Then one of them drifts too far. It goes out toward a further patch of grass with open ground behind it, and several arrows go almost together. The antelope turns and runs. It goes flat out across the grassland with the men already moving behind it, and it does not stop at the edge of the open ground the way they hoped it might. Instead, it goes into the low bushes at full speed. That costs everybody. Thorn does not open for people the way it opens for something built low and fast, and the group comes out the far side further behind than it went in. The line of the chase bends. The animal breaks left out toward harder ground, and two more arrows go while everyone is still running. Then the ground drops away into a dry watercourse. It goes down one bank and up the other without slowing, and the men have to take that in their own time. And for a stretch after it, there is nothing ahead of them but grass moving where something went through. The poison has been working the whole time. You can see it in the turns. They stop being sharp. The animal starts running in a line instead of cutting, and it stops looking behind it, and the distance between it and the men behind it begins to close for the first time since the first arrow. It comes down in the open a long way from where any of this started. Nobody goes straight in. They come up slowly, and only when it is finished does anybody sit, and everybody sits because there is no water left between them. The sun is well past its highest point when they get moving again. The last thing the ground gives them that day is a set of large tracks in soft earth, and a great many of them. The herd is out in a wide clearing, grazing calmly, and this is a different proposition from anything else today. Bigger animals, better eyesight, and open ground on every side. Zebra, do not let anybody walk up. So the men use the low bushes and take it in pieces, closing a little at a time, stopping whenever heads come up. When one animal comes away from the rest, several arrows go one after another. It does not go down. It goes at a speed that is difficult to believe from something that size straight out across open country, and it is a long way off before it slows to anything. Then it is a matter of following. The trail runs over ground hard enough that most of it has to be read from bent grass rather than prints, and it goes on for a good deal longer than anybody wants it to. They find it late standing in the open, and it has very little left. By the time it is finished, the light has gone amber across the plain, and nobody is carrying an animal this size back to camp whole. So it gets opened up out there on the grass. The meat comes off in portions a man can manage tied with fiber stripped from what is growing nearby, and then the weight gets split across the whole group. That way, it takes one trip instead of 3. They start back with the light going carrying more than they have brought in for weeks. This one does not begin with a trail. It begins with a set of prints in the dust between 2 huts found in the morning by somebody who went out to build the fire back up. Not out in the bush somewhere, right there on ground where children play through the afternoon and where everybody sleeps behind bent branches and grass. And it is not the first time. There have been sounds coming out of the dark for several nights, running close enough that people in the camp have stopped pretending they are further off than they are. Somebody saw it at dusk 2 evenings ago, moving along the tree line at the edge of the clearing. So the decision gets made, and it is not made lightly. Everything in this video up to now has been about staying out of a leopard's way. There is a point where that stops being available, and this camp has reached it. They leave before the sun is over the treetops. Bows, quivers, and tools made from what the bush provides. Nothing else. The ground is still damp, and every step lands soft on it. The man in front reads as he goes. Grass pressed flat, prints in the mud at the edge of a drainage line, claw marks scored down the bark of a tree chest high on a man. To anybody else, these are nothing. Here they are directions, and the direction they give is toward low brush out on the open country rather than back into the forest. That is worse, not better. A leopard in low brush can hold itself completely still for a very long time, and it may not show itself at all until the gap between it and you has already closed to something nobody would choose. The wind moves the grass ahead of them, and everybody stops. It moves again, and they stop again. That happens more times than anyone bothers counting, and each time somebody checks the bush that moved before the group goes on. Nobody is speaking now. Everything runs on hand signals, on glances, on the same small sounds they use every day out here, and the pace has come down to almost nothing. Then there is a faint movement in the low bushes ahead, and the whole group stops at once. A spotted shoulder shifts behind the grass. Then two pale eyes come up out of it, already turned toward them, and it is a great deal closer than any of these men would have chosen. Nobody raises a bow yet. What happens instead is that everybody stays exactly where they are and watches it, and it watches back, and neither side does anything at all for a long moment. Have you ever had to decide something with no time to think about it and no way to take it back? That is what is happening in this silence. The boughs come up slowly, and nobody takes his eyes off the opening in the brush, and there is one arrow that matters. It goes. Then there is noise, movement through branches, birds coming off the low trees all along that stretch of ground. Nobody moves in. They hold where they are and watch every last movement, because a wounded leopard is dangerous right up until it is not, and low brush is exactly the sort of place a mistake gets made in. If this is the Africa you came looking for, subscribe, because there is one more thing waiting back at camp. When they are finally certain, they go forward carefully from the side. Only then does anybody breathe out. The bows come down, and for a while, nobody says anything. Nobody celebrates. Nobody claps anybody on the shoulder. Nobody retells the shot. Nobody repeats the name of the man who fired it. Then they carry it back, with the light now coming down through the trees along the path home. The camp sees them before they arrive. Nobody has to be told what it means. Everybody in that clearing understands that the thing which had been coming close at night is not going to come close again. And then the day goes back to being an ordinary day. The animal gets handled the way anything else would be. The fire gets built up in the open ground in the middle of the camp. Nothing here gets treated as a trophy, and nothing about it changes anybody's standing. Which is the part that surprises outsiders most, and it is worth staying for, because what happens around that fire tonight is the strangest thing in this entire video. The load comes down in the open in the middle of camp where everybody can see it.
Having a little snack right there.
Within a few minutes, it has stopped belonging to anybody.
No problem. Wow. Unbelievable. What a day.
The first thing onto the fire is not the meat. It is the porcupine turned over the flames until the quills burn back and the outer skin can come away, and the smell of that reaches the far side of the clearing before anything else does. Then the rest gets cut up right there on the ground. Some of it goes onto wooden sticks and in close over the flames. The rest goes into a clay pot with water to sit and cook slowly for hours until the meat gives way completely. Both need managing and both get it. People take turns feeding the fire and moving the coals so nothing on one side cooks faster than the other. The sticks get turned. Somebody is always sitting with the pot. Smoke goes up thin and slow. There is almost nothing here in the way of seasoning. No spices, no oil, nothing set aside on a shelf anywhere. What there is instead is a very long habit of knowing exactly how much fire a thing needs. Then it gets divided, and this is the part outsiders come a long way to see. The old people get theirs. The women who spent the day digging tubers get theirs. So do the children, and so do the people who never went anywhere near any of it. Nobody asks whose arrow made the kill. The man who put it there gets a slightly larger share, and that is the whole of his reward, and nobody makes any more of it than that. And by tonight, half this camp will not remember which of them it was. Children lean on whichever adult is nearest. The old people are telling the day back to them and getting parts of it wrong and being corrected by people who cannot agree with each other either. But look at what happened during the division. Certain cuts came off first and went to one side on their own. Nobody announced it, nobody questioned it. Those pieces are called epimi meat. They belong only to initiated men who eat them later, away from the fire after dark. Women do not eat them. Boys who have not been initiated do not either. In a camp where almost everything gets shared the moment it arrives, this is one of the very few exceptions. Later, when the fire has burned low, a few men pick up those pieces and walk beyond the edge of the light. Nobody follows them. Before long, only the fire is left in the middle of the camp. By morning, the fire is grey and nothing has been put away because there is nothing here to put away. One day, this camp will move on. The huts will be left standing where they are, and within a season, the bush will begin taking them back, and almost nothing will show that anybody was ever in this clearing. Nothing owned, nothing stored, nothing built to outlast the people who built it. Out here, that has never been a limitation. You came for the leopard, and most people do. The animal in the tree The mark in the sand with no feet on either side of it. The thing that came close to the huts for 3 nights running and then stopped coming. All of that is real. But by tomorrow, there will be almost no sign the hunt happened at all. The tracks in the sand go with the wind. The fire goes cold. The meat was gone before anybody slept. What is left is what the children watched yesterday. The ancient rules were never written down anywhere. They survived because every generation stood close enough to see the one before it work. That is what living in Africa still looks like for the Hadzabe. Somebody walks out of that camp before sunrise tomorrow with a wooden bow and no idea at all what is out there. The rule has not changed either. If they see it first, it is a day like any other. If it sees them first, nobody in this camp will ever know what happened.